Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. I want to start this week's show with the same words I used to start last week's show. The murder of Charlie Kirk was a despicable act. No matter what anyone may have thought about Charlie Kirk or the things he said, he had every right to say them. The First Amendment is designed to protect the rights of people to say things some may find deeply offensive. In fact, that's why it's there. You don't need the First Amendment to protect speech everyone agrees with, and you can't have a democracy if people are afraid to speak. That's what I said last week, and it's still true today. Unfortunately, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and the understandable anger that rose from it, free speech is facing its greatest challenge in a very long time. Free speech is a hard concept for a lot of people to fully grasp. I can appreciate that. But you would hope the Attorney General wouldn't be one of them and that she would get it. This was the United States Attorney General Pam Bondi on Monday, appearing on the Katie Miller podcast.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Let's be clear. Hate speech is still free speech. Charlie Kirk said many things that people considered hateful and disgusting, but he was free to say it. On Tuesday, a reporter from ABC News asked the president about Bondi's comments.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
We'd probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart.
That's the President of the United States saying perhaps his Justice Department should criminally prosecute that reporter. Why? Because Trump believes that reporter hates him. And if you think we shouldn't take comments like that seriously, the problem is the folks who work for Donald Trump do take him seriously. And that brings us to the suspension by ABC of Jimmy Kimmel. Now, there are those who do not see the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel as a free speech or First Amendment issue. They will argue that the First Amendment does not guarantee Jimmy Kimmel a late-night talk show any more than it guarantees me this show on Sunday morning. And they're absolutely right. In the case of Jimmy Kimmel, ABC can remove him the same way CBS can remove me if they want to. What the First Amendment does say, however, is that the government cannot use its vast powers to threaten or silence individuals. And yet here is Brendan Carr, the head of the Federal Communications Commission, threatening to go after the licenses of ABC stations that carry Jimmy Kimmel because of comments Kimmel made about the Charlie Kirk shooting.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Within hours of Carr making those threats, ABC announced they were suspending Jimmy Kimmel's show. Trump applauded the move and called on NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers as well. And while coming home from his trip to England, he suggested it was time for a wholesale purge of networks or stations who criticize him.
They give me only bad publicity from the press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away.
We are seeing it in Florida as well. Ron DeSantis is threatening to fire teachers, nurses, and other government employees who post about Charlie Kirk on their personal media pages in a way the governor might find offensive. Many have already been suspended. That is the government using its power to decide what speech is acceptable and what isn't. So let me repeat something I said earlier. You can't have a democracy if people are afraid to speak. Now, this week I spoke to Democratic Congressman Max Frost about where we are heading, and I began by asking for his reaction to ABC suspending Jimmy Kimmel.
This is a very scary thing going on, and we got to take a step back. It's not just that ABC and Disney are bending the knee to an authoritarian and to this fascist government, but it's the fact that the FCC chair earlier that morning said, and I quote, They have to do this or else. That they have to punish Jimmy Kimmel or else. On comments that I really don't think were that bad comments. He condemned the violence. He was trying to make a point. But the problem here is we look throughout human history, when fascist governments start going for artists and comedians, it's not because they're strong, but it's because they're weak. The other thing is people need to follow the money. And the Oversight Committee, we're going to have more to say on this soon, looking at a possible investigation. But let's look at the facts. Nexstar and Sinclair together were pushing forward this this bid to essentially have ABC can Jimmy Kimmel. Nexstar is trying to acquire their top competitor right now. They're trying to purchase their top competitor. And guess who has to approve that acquisition? The FCC. It's all connected to billionaires making more money, mega corporations making more money. This is a big red flag for us with the consolidation of media being owned by just a few different companies and a few billionaires that have no problem bending the knee to Donald Trump when someone says something, not that he just disagrees with, but when someone says something to criticize him. This is the foundation of this country, the First Amendment, the ability to criticize, to parody, to make fun of our politicians and our leaders. And whether
well, let me jump in because I want to have this as a conversation as well. Yeah. And I do want to return. I want to go back in a second to the question about the use of some language that you did in that and whether or not times have changed at all with regard to that. But I want to just stay on the point that you were just making right there. The point that you were just making, though, about the connecting the dots between what Brandon Carr said, that to me is where this crosses the line in terms of government interfering in this sort of way. I just want to be clear about that and have you expand a little bit more, because the First Amendment doesn't say everyone gets a late night talk show.
Exactly. The issue here isn't even necessarily Jimmy Kimmel himself. It's what happened before that, right? It's the fact that the government used its pressure and threatened the company, man, really all companies, to say, if you don't do what we want, we're going to revoke broadcasting licenses of your affiliates. And that's where it's against the First Amendment that says Congress should make no law infringing on speech. The government should not be interfering and trying to keep people from their speech. And that's exactly what happened. And again, you tie it all the way back to money. And this is part of the problem with fewer and fewer companies, corporations, and billionaires owning essentially all the media in this country. And we're going to be looking into that as well.
You described it earlier, and I do want to go back to it because I think there is a heightened state of urgency around these words that we often find ourselves using: authoritarian, fascist. There are those that will hear you use those types of words and say that that is the kind of speech that got Charlie Kirk shot, that got Charlie Kirk assassinated. When you start branding your enemies fascist or Nazis or authoritarian, then that becomes problematic, that those words can generate to violence. How do you respond, and why does it give you any pause, the Kirk assassination, in terms of the language that you're now using right now with us?
No, it doesn't. Number one, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm simply defining this administration. When I urge people to look at what an authoritarian is, what fascism is, look at what the Trump administration is doing, and ask themselves the question, do they believe that this administration, that this person is an authoritarian? This is the guy who, after he met with Putin and Putin told him, you got to get rid of the mail-in voting, what did he do? The next day, he does a press conference saying he's going to target mail-in voting, and even said that Putin's the one that told him that. So this is someone who likes to hang out with authoritarians. This is someone who has said during the campaign that he wants to be a dictator for one day. So I'm not here to be hyperbolic. Now, as it relates to the horrible tragedy of what happened to Charlie Kirk, I'll say two things. Number one, this was an extremist and a radical who had access to a gun and then did this horrible assassination and political assassination and gun violence of Charlie Kirk. What the problem is if we then say, well, we can't criticize people we disagree with because of that, in many cases, you have given a win to the extremists and the people who look to seek to use political violence to silence all of us. When we talk about toning down the rhetoric, what we're talking about is not engaging in talking about violence, not seeing violence as something that we need to do. I was one of the first people to go online right after I saw this shooting to say I completely condemned this shooting so people 100% know where I am, and to connect the dots to the fact that we have so much gun violence and rising political violence in this country. And it's not a problem of one side, even though most statistics show that most of it comes from the right. I'm not here to score political points. We need to condemn it on all sides, whether it's the left or the right. And so I'm going to continue to talk about what this administration is doing in very direct terms, but I'm going to always condemn political violence. I've always been committed to nonviolence. But if for someone to say me calling Trump an authoritarian is what led to the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's completely wrong and preposterous. And that's an example of trying to use a tragedy, a murder, and something that we all condemn to score political points, which I think is disgraceful.
Well, I think what they would say, in all fairness, is by calling Trump a authoritarian, by calling Trump a fascist, you give license to those who have tried to harm Donald Trump. Let's face it, there have been 2 assassination attempts, one that came very close to being successful against Donald Trump. And again, those who are engaging in that sort of violence may use the rhetoric that people calling him a Nazi or a fascist or an authoritarian as justification for their actions. Again, does that give you any pause at all in terms of what words you use?
I'm always cognizant of the words I'm using, and I do realize that I'm a political leader, but I will always call balls and strikes how they are, no matter, what jersey the team is wearing. And in the case of Donald Trump, he is someone who has worked with people who wrote Project 2025 are loud and proud fascists. What he is doing right now is authoritarianism. My mom came here from Cuba in the late 1960s, and part of the reason and part of the way that dictators and authoritarians get to power is when they silence dissent and people are too scared to say what's going on. So I completely object to that, and it's very personal to me.
Well, when we see it also in the larger context, which it gets so hard because it's like a fire hose of material that keeps coming towards us, when you put it in the context of going after universities, going after law firms, lawsuits against newspapers. Right now he's suing the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. The comments that Donald Trump made this week to a reporter from ABC News saying, perhaps you should be criminally investigated because you have hate in your heart towards me. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General's comments at the outset of the week. I think it's this broader issue that becomes so disturbing when you take it all into its totality.
Exactly. And when you look at all these different actions that the president's taken, not just the president, but his administration has taken, you can connect it directly to many of the authoritarians throughout history. And it would be a disservice of me as an elected official, but also as a member of the oppositional party in this moment, to not call that how it is so people understand what's going on, that this is not normal, that Donald Trump in many cases is blatantly breaking the law, that in part of the reason why the temperature is so amped up in this country and why political violence has gone up so much is because of him and because of where he's pushed this country over the last decade. And I feel it is important to talk about that. Now, I'll always condemn political violence. I've been fighting against gun violence since I was 15 years old. Okay, I've been to more than 60 vigils from 15 to 24 years old of dead people that I didn't even know. And so I'm a proponent of peace. But when we have a president who is weaponizing the government against the people, and he's doing it to people on the left, and he's doing it to people on the right. A lot of these conservative news outlets are scared to even, say any kind of criticism of him. It's not even about him protecting an ideology. It's about him protecting himself. We got to be honest about what's going on. It's really scary. And a lot of people who've come from authoritarian countries are saying, this looks very familiar. And so we have to talk about it, inspire people to get out to the ballot box so we can hopefully win in the midterms and be able to have a check on this administration.
When we come back, I'll talk to Miami businessman Richard Lamidan, who is running for Congress here in South Florida. Stay with us.